Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Tuesday, December 7th. This is Africa 54.
COVID-19 shots are finally arriving in Africa, but challenges hobble vaccination campaigns. Religious groups in South Africa urge the faithful to get vaccinated. And Nigerians turn to firewood and charcoal as cooking gas prices surge.
Experts meeting at the Partnership for African Vaccine Manufacturing Conference in Rwanda said Tuesday the COVID-19 pandemic had shown that Africa urgently needed to tackle its dependence on imported vaccines. But they outlined daunting obstacles from brain drain to power shortages. While COVID-19 vaccine supplies to Africa are finally being ramped up, getting shots into arms is still proving to be a challenge. David Doyle has more.
At the Sekanani Clinic in rural Kenya, they've only got one reliable fridge. And Clinical Officer Gerald Yayale says making sure they've enough COVID-19 vaccine is a challenge.
We do not have a COVID vaccine now. We've run out of stock 5 days ago.
His clinic recently had to turn Kenyans away. But Narok County, where it's located, is not short of shots. 14,000 were sitting in a fridge in the nearest town, around 70 miles away. A mix-up meant Sekanani was not sent enough. This is an example of the challenges being faced across Africa that experts say could have an impact on the pandemic globally. Until recently, vaccine supplies were low, partly due to hoarding by richer countries. Just 102 million of the continent's population are fully vaccinated. That low inoculation rate, only 7.5%, encourages viral mutations like the new Omicron variant. Shortages of funds, medical staff and equipment in some parts have further hobbled getting needles into arms. But with deliveries now finally expected to surge, experts say such weaknesses will be further exposed. Internal documents from the Gavi Vaccine Alliance say a substantial volume will be Pfizer mRNA vaccines, which require cold chain storage. Even Kenya, which has the capacity to store 3 million Pfizer shots, is worried its cold chain will become constrained, says Dr. Willis Akwale, head of the government's COVID-19 task force.
But we must also sustain the childhood immunization programs. So the cold chain is likely to start getting constrained. And that is then going to be the challenge we face.
Another problem is vaccine hesitancy, sometimes driven by religious beliefs or mistrust of Western drug companies. Kenya has ramped up its campaign with television and radio ads and on social media. In Narok, herder Julius Tuyoto says he hears the government warnings. But as the disease has not hit his community, it doesn't feel real.
No one came here. We only hear that people got vaccinated. We don't know why. We only hear there is a disease.
He says he went to a hospital to see if he could get a shot. We were told the vaccine was over, he says. I was not interested in following it up again.
David Doyle of Reuters with that report. In South Africa, where daily infections are soaring, driven by the Omicron variant, many students say their biggest fear is the impact on their education. Clara Frank has more.
They may be living in an Omicron epicenter, but for many students at Tshwane University of Technology, in the metropolitan area that includes the capital, Pretoria, they're more concerned about how the new variant will mess up their exams than catching it. South Africa's daily infections surged last week to more than 16,000 on Friday, from roughly 2,300 at the start of the week. President Cyril Ramaphosa said on Monday that Omicron appears to be dominating new cases across the country's 9 provinces.
I'm not good at attending online, but then sometimes it becomes a little bit difficult, so the lectures sometimes are absent.
But management student Nkubeko Chisale's worry was disruption to his classes. He says he's scared to get the vaccine, but may still do so. He's not alone. Official data shows only a fifth of 18 to 34-year-olds have had the shot. But some early data has suggested that Omicron may be resulting in young people getting the severe symptoms that, until now, have typically been suffered by their elders. Ramaphosa has urged South Africans to get inoculated and said hospitals were being prepared for more admissions. Scientists in South Africa and across the world are racing to establish if Omicron is more contagious, causes more severe disease, and is more resistant to vaccines. But some anecdotal accounts are reassuring, suggesting that many infections it causes are mild. Supply chain management student Thato Letsholo says he was told to get the vaccine by his mother, who's a nurse.
It's going to kill more people, or more people are going to get infected.
But like many of his fellow students, his biggest fear personally was online learning and having to repeat a year if his academic calendar is delayed. Clara Frank, Washington.
Most South African companies and institutions are making COVID-19 vaccinations mandatory to help ease vaccine hesitancy. So South Africa's Religious Forum Against COVID-19 has been campaigning for religious followers to take the jab. For VOA, Marisa de Klerk reports from Johannesburg.
Volunteers at the BAPS Sri Swaminarayan Hindu Temple in Johannesburg are urging the public to get a COVID shot at their government-registered vaccination site. They have vaccinated about 3,000 people since September, but South Africa is seeing a fresh wave of infections driven by the Omicron variant.
We wanted to create a site that was comfortable, that people could move around in and get their vaccine quickly. BAPS Charities has done a little bit of outreach work. They are already volunteers of various backgrounds and professions.
South Africa is the worst hit by the pandemic on the continent, with over 3 million confirmed cases and nearly 90,000 deaths. The Omicron variant has many here concerned that those numbers could quickly rise with a fresh wave of infections. The Religious Forum Against COVID-19 has brought various faiths together to pool resources and better address vaccine hesitancy amongst religious believers.
There is a parallel movement, so to speak, about people creating hesitancy with regard to vaccines. We do not agree with those particular situations, so let us look at solutions rather than actually being negative towards situations.
South Africa has yet to reach its goal to vaccinate 70% of adults with at least one jab by the end of the year. So far, just over 40% of adults have gotten at least one dose. Statistics indicate youth are the least likely to get vaccinated. Student Taylor Betcha came to this center because it's close to home and not crowded like others.
It wasn't bad at all. I feel that more people should do it because it's emptier and it doesn't really hurt at all.
Analysts say targeting young people should be a top priority.
If these churches and these international or this interfaith forum really wanted to be effective, it would be to find a way to target young people and encourage them to get vaccinated. And then, of course, to encourage people who have to make decisions about whether to spend 50 Rand traveling to a vaccine site to get vaccinated versus feeding their families.
While the Religious Forum Against COVID-19 does not have figures on the rate of vaccination amongst religious believers yet, giving the jab at houses of worship seems to help. The BAPS Sri Swaminarayan Temple says about 90% of its congregants are already vaccinated. Marisa de Klerk for VOA News, Johannesburg.
More than 5 million people worldwide have had their lives cut short by COVID-19, and the number keeps rising. VOA's Carol Pearson explains one approach in making a vaccine that's been effective against polio, measles, Ebola, and a host of other viruses.
People can get COVID-19 even though they've been fully vaccinated, but that doesn't mean the vaccine has failed. Those who are fully vaccinated against this virus are so far much less likely to end up in a hospital or on a ventilator.
The goal of vaccination is to reduce the severity of disease in almost all vaccines in use and not to prevent infection entirely.
The oldest method to make a vaccine uses either a live virus that is too weak to reproduce, scientists call it a live attenuated virus, or a dead virus that, because it is dead, can't reproduce, but can still cause an immune response. Polio vaccines have used both dead and weakened live polio viruses with great success. Many countries are now polio-free. In 2021, only 2 children in the entire world contracted the wild polio virus. 3 COVID-19 vaccines use weakened adenoviruses, benign viruses that cause colds, as their vectors. Vectors are simply delivery systems used to introduce a more dangerous virus, either a weakened live virus or a dead one, or a portion of that virus. The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine uses a weakened chimpanzee adenovirus that does not infect humans. Sputnik V and the Johnson & Johnson vaccines use weakened human adenoviruses. With all 3 vaccines, scientists remove a gene from the coronavirus's spike protein and put it into the adenoviruses. Once injected, the viruses enter the cells and start to produce the spike protein. Then the body mounts an attack. Remember, the spike protein is only a part of the coronavirus and doesn't cause COVID-19, so there's no danger of getting the illness from the vaccine.
You don't just mount an immune response to the adenovirus, but you also mount the immune response to the protein that it encodes, that spike protein that is part of the virus causing COVID.
The World Health Organization has authorized use of the AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson vaccines, but not Sputnik V. The WHO says it needs more data from the Sputnik trials. Cox says of the 3 vaccines that use an adenovirus, scientists favor the AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson vaccines.
We know the most about the AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson vaccines because they have been given to tens of millions, if not 100 million people worldwide. So we know the most about their side effect profiles and their immune responses. We have far less data on the Sputnik vaccine because it has just been used far less frequently, and there are simply fewer international studies that have assessed it.
While some people choose not to get a vaccine, others are willing to travel long distances to get one. Hondurans are willing to cross a river to get the vaccine in neighboring Nicaragua. The pandemic is far from over. Some scientists expect COVID to be with us for 3 to 4 years. And even with the best scientists in the world working on vaccines and treatments, doctors are concerned that as the virus continues to infect unvaccinated people and mutate, at some point, the vaccines we have now won't be able to offer full protection against COVID-19. Carol Pearson, VOA News.
Turning to Central Africa now, at least 38 inmates were killed and dozens more injured in a fire on Tuesday at the main prison in Burundi's capital, Gitega. The country's vice president told reporters. Still images provided by SOS Media's Burundi news outlet showed the extent of the damage to the buildings. 12 inmates died of asphyxia as they tried to flee the burning buildings, and 26 died of severe injuries, according to Vice President Prosper Bazombanza. He did not say what might have caused the blaze. Healthcare disruptions linked to the coronavirus pandemic helped malaria kill 69,000 more people in 2020 than the previous year. But a worst-case scenario was averted, according to the World Health Organization. In total, over 627,000 people globally, most of them babies in the poorest parts of Africa, were killed by malaria last year, compared with 558,000 in 2019, according to the WHO's annual malaria report. The number eclipses the 224,000 people reported to have died from the coronavirus in Africa since the start of the pandemic.
With the tools we have right now, we can save lives, and we have saved lives, but we cannot imagine that we will go on making the type of progress that is needed. We need also technological tools, we need new vaccines, we need new medicines, and the fact that for the first time a malaria vaccine can join the other tools that we have to more effectively fight malaria, to reduce what we estimate an extra 40,000 to 80,000 deaths of African children every year, is a scientific and public health breakthrough.
Experts hope the fight against malaria might gain considerable ground following the WHO's recommendation in October that RTSS, or Moscarex, a vaccine developed by British drug maker GlaxoSmithKline, should be widely given to children in Africa. Coming up, Nigerians turn to firewood and charcoal as cooking gas price doubles. But first, Hedy Adams tells us what's on tap for Wednesday's Straight Talk Africa. We'll be right back.
Be sure to join me for the next Straight Talk Africa. We'll talk about the Nobel Prizes. Africa has had many illustrious and some controversial Nobel laureates. There was jubilation when Tanzanian-born novelist Abdulrazak Gurna won the 2021 Nobel Prize in Literature. But how relevant are these awards to Africans? And are these institutions in step with the times? We'll also discuss whether it's time Africa had a Nobel-style awards of its own. Join me, Hedy Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
HIV/AIDS remains a major global public health problem. It has claimed the lives of over 36 million people to date, according to the World Health Organization. Observers say while some progress have been made, the HIV response has suffered significant setbacks recently due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu spoke with Dr. Daniel Were, project director with JPIGO Kenya, to discuss challenges and opportunities in the fight against HIV/AIDS in Kenya.
I think there was a lot of powerlessness, but I must say that over the years we have seen a lot of scientific advances. First of all, the breakthrough with antiretroviral therapy really was a great game changer in terms of addressing the pandemic. Over the last couple of years, we have seen a lot of great advances, particularly in biomedical HIV prevention. This is emerging from the realization that even globally, while we are aiming towards the UNAIDS targets initially 90% of people who are HIV infected know their status, 90% are linked to treatment, and 90% are virally suppressed. And even with great advances towards 95, there is a realization that we cannot treat ourselves out of this pandemic. Over the last decade, we have seen a lot of advances, particularly in the field of biomedical HIV prevention. Initially, of course, it was more just about condoms, then voluntary medical male circumcision. Now we are talking about daily oral PrEP, also the preventive vaginal ring that was just pre-qualified by the World Health Organization last year, and many others in the research pipeline. While there is progress where we are, while we have not achieved the goals of where we want to be, there is a lot of optimism if I look at the years ahead.
Now, there is another epidemic the world is fighting currently. What does the fight against HIV/AIDS in the context of COVID look like for patients and providers?
One is it has complicated delivery. Secondly, it has also pushed the boundaries of innovation. In terms of complicating delivery, most people would actually go to health facilities to receive their HIV care and treatment. And what we saw from last year when COVID came into the scene, most of the health facilities shifted their focus to start addressing COVID. And this complicated or hindered access, including the fact that a number of COVID containment measures put in place by the government, like in Kenya, included restricting movement. But on the other hand, I think the glimmer of hope that we did see is also people thinking innovatively of how best do we sustain the gains that we have made in the HIV response, and that is not necessarily lost because of COVID. We have seen a lot of advances towards things like telemedicine. These are things that had not been thought about more critically.
Talk to us about your work on the ground through JPIGO. Part of it is working with the Kenyan government in scaling up oral PrEP. What progress have been made?
Part of the work that we did was really to pioneer and demonstrate that it was actually feasible to do this not only in Kenya, but in sub-Saharan Africa. We've done this in partnership with the government of Kenya, ensuring that the right policies are in place, ensuring that the health system in Kenya was prepared and strengthened to support the scale-up of oral PrEP. Over the last 5 years through this partnership with the government, but also working with also other stakeholders in the scene, as well as advocates and beneficiary groups. I think Kenya has more than 130,000 individuals who have ever initiated oral PrEP.
What do you say in terms of long-term solutions as we move forward toward 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals?
The whole underlying agenda is towards simplification of how biomedical HIV prevention is actually delivered. Like daily oral PrEP has been highly medicalized, delivered within the health system, which is constrained by a lot of limitations. In many countries, HIV testing is actually done by healthcare providers within the health facility. But we are seeing now there's a lot of movement towards adoption of things like HIV self-testing. And Kenya as a country is actually spearheading a lot of efforts in this direction so that, for example, clients then can test themselves to know their HIV status, but also there are a number of things, including as part of this agenda, what we are calling demedicalization of the delivery of biomedical HIV prevention, which includes adopting community models, partnering with a number of other organizations to actually test out new models, including things like a virtual care model, whether we are able to adopt things like e-pharmacy delivery platforms, working with community health workers, working with peer educators, working through outreach models are some of the strategies that have actually proven to work, which also resonate with most of the clients and are actually more accessible. They are less inconveniencing and they're actually less stigmatizing.
Is there a silver lining in the COVID pandemic for the fight against HIV?
You can imagine where, like in the case of Kenya, where the first case was actually formally reported was 1984. And it has taken almost 3 decades before some of these advances are actually starting to be met. And if you look at what has happened with COVID, where in less than a year, when the whole global field and landscape was actually united together towards finding a vaccine, that has actually yielded a lot of fruitful gains in terms of the COVID response. What this tells us, even in terms of the HIV response, that when all stakeholders actually pull together in the right direction, then we are able to actually quickly tackle a pandemic such as HIV globally.
Daniel Were, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you too.
That was Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu speaking with Dr. Daniel Were, project director with JPIGO, Kenya. Clashes erupted in Nairobi after a Kenyan police officer shot dead 6 people in a rampage on Tuesday and then shot and killed himself, according to a senior police officer and the Directorate of Criminal Investigations. The officer first shot and killed his wife at their home before setting off with his service-issued AK-47 rifle to shoot dead another 4 people. The Directorate of Criminal Investigations said on its Twitter account, describing the shooter as a rogue officer. Angry residents near where the incident took place later set fire to tires on a road to protest against the violence. State-run police watchdog Independent Police Oversight Authority said in a statement it would start investigations into the incident. Nigerians are turning to cheaper firewood and charcoal for cooking after a spike in price for cooking gas. Nigeria's liquefied petroleum gas suppliers and environmentalists are urging authorities to bring prices down and prevent a surge in air pollution from cooking fire. Timothy Obiezu reports from Abuja.
Frida Igri is preparing to make her native afang soup for her family. But there's one problem. Her cooking gas tank is empty. To refill it, she says it will cost around $25, more than double the price since October.
This scarcity of gas and the high price of it is unbearable, because going to the market right now, buying food stuff costly, coming back to cook again with the gas costly, is not easy. It's not easy.
Nigerian gas dealers attribute the hike of liquefied petroleum gas to the introduction in August of a 7.5% import tax or VAT on gas in a bid to expand the country's revenue base. Up to 70% of gas Nigeria consumes comes from imports, even though the country is a major oil producer with gas reserves. Economists also say devaluation of the Nigerian naira currency and an unstable inflow of foreign exchange are helping drive up prices. As workaround, many Nigerians like Igri are turning to cheaper alternatives, firewood and charcoal.
We just use it because of, at least it's manageable. So the gas there, if you want to go for gas, is quite expensive.
The growing demand for charcoal is helping local dealers like Ashiru Mohammed, who is increasing his output.
Business was not this good before because more people used gas, but now they are all buying charcoal.
The demand for charcoal could lead to serious deforestation, warn environmentalists. Conservationist David Michael Terungwa wants authorities to reverse the gas import tax.
There will be massive deforestation, which is already going on, but this hike in prices will even make it worse, because the average Nigerian, could afford to use gas, but right now, not everybody can afford it.
Last month, the Nigerian Gas Dealers Association called on President Muhammadu Buhari to address the issue. Nigerian authorities have yet to respond, but at the recent Global Climate Change Summit, President Buhari pledged to end deforestation by 2030 and carbon emissions by 2060. Conservationists say that goal hangs in the balance. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
And that wraps up our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From the Africa 54 team here in Washington, D.C., thanks for watching.